Morning everyone, I'm Graeme Rogerson. I'm like a ski bum come project manager at the OGTC. I've been kicking about the industry around the Expo this week. People have been asking me what we're doing in small pools at the OGTC and what the strategy is. I'd just like to say this is the strategy. This is available at the moment for our members. We're hopefully going to get it online eventually. But we spent quite a bit of time in 2017 setting the scene. So we've got a couple of presentations here just on where we're at with Tie Back the Future. But if I can find, here we go. See if this works. I'd just like to play a wee movie first.
Living systems have been around for a few billion years and will be around for many more. In the living world, there's no landfill. Instead, materials flow. One species' waste is another's food, energy is provided by the sun, things grow, then die, and nutrients return to the soil safely. And it works. Yet as humans, we've adopted a linear approach. We take, we make, and we dispose. A new phone comes out, so we ditch the old one. Our washing machine packs up, so we buy another. Each time we do this, we're eating into a finite supply of resources and often producing toxic waste. It simply can't work long term. So what can? If we accept that the living world's cyclical model works, can we change our way of thinking so that we too operate a circular economy? Let's start with the biological cycle. How can our waste build capital rather than reduce it? By rethinking and redesigning products and components, and the packaging they come in, we can create safe and compostable materials that help grow more stuff. As they say in the movies, no resources have been lost in the making of this material. So what about the washing machines, mobile phones, fridges? We know they don't biodegrade. Here, we're talking about another sort of rethink, a way to cycle valuable metals, polymers, and alloys so they maintain their quality and continue to be useful beyond the shelf life of individual products. What if the goods of today became the resources of tomorrow? It makes commercial sense. Instead of the throw away and replace culture we've become used to, we'd adopt a return and renew one, where products and components are designed to be disassembled and regenerated. One solution may be to rethink the way we view ownership. What if we never actually owned our technologies? We simply licensed them from the manufacturers. Now, let's put these two cycles together. Imagine if we could design products to come back to their makers, their technical materials being reused and their biological parts increasing agricultural value. And imagine that these products are made and transported using renewable energy. Here we have a model that builds prosperity long term. And the good news is, there are already companies out there who are beginning to adopt this way of working. But the circular economy isn't about one manufacturer changing one product. It's about all the interconnecting companies that form our infrastructure and economy coming together. It's about energy. It's about rethinking the operating system itself. We have a fantastic opportunity to open new perspectives and new horizons. Instead of remaining trapped in the frustrations of the present, with creativity and innovation, we really can rethink and redesign our future.
I am sure a lot of you have seen that before. I quite like that video to set the scene. So, and if you anybody wants to find out anything more about circular economy, economic models, you won't go far wrong in having a wee look at the Ellen MacArthur Foundation website. I've got a couple of slides here just to let you know where we are with this initiative. See if I can bring them up. Okay, cool. So the background on this is about these small pools are small. If we keep developing them following a linear economic model way, we're not going to make the step change required. So we spent a lot of 2017 looking at this in some detail. We've undertaken around about £250,000 worth of engineering on how we'd bring an economic model into how we go about developing UKCS tiebacks. We first presented on this at the OGTC 30th round tech event in August, and we completed the study work just in December last year. What we're showing is we think there's 6 key areas that we need to look at and bring some technology through to market to support implementing a circular economy. We think the study shows that it actually provides us with a roadmap to get after. It's not one tech, it's going to be a suite of technologies. I think it talks a lot to what Neil Gordon said in the plenary session and what Subsea UK about today. 80% of the technology that we maybe need to deliver on this initiative, it's around us, it's here, it's now. We just need to use it in a different way. I think Mary's touched on the economics, but at a costing perspective, an install cost for the architecture, we think it does reduce the cost by 50%, halves it, and we believe it would half the time from, say, an AFE to first oil. It's got a good environmental story, and it's got a good cross-industry story as well. Of course, if you're picking stuff up, you'd be left with a clear seabed. A lot more detail is available, and it has been available since August last year on our website. That's the link down here. So if you're interested in it all and like more background details, it's all there. We did apply what we learned to a standard tieback, if you like, 10 kilometres, a couple of wells, 7 million barrel field. And even without maybe touching on some of the other large cost impacts, the topside modifications that might be required, the well construction costs, we feel even this could have the big enough impact to make stuff that's uneconomic economic. What are we doing now? This is what we're doing now in the 6 different areas. Probably don't have time to go through it all in detail, but I'm going to hear a bit more about our work with the fishing industry and our safety zone piece from Iain at LR next. But this is just showing that we've got 5 projects up and running to support the initiative already. They're relatively small, but at least we've got them more. And we've got 13 at proposal stage, looking for the industry support to get them over the line. And there's a lot more behind that that's required in addition to what you see here. For a couple of well, I know, quite a lot of chats around the industry about this with some of our members, and I'm just throwing up some of the initial challenges that have come out. So I thought I'd just fire from the hip and go down these as the last slide. For sure, it's around about it would be flawed if you're not seeing any benefit until down the line. I think if you look what needs to happen to bring this initiative into place, you'd actually see the majority of the cost savings in first use. For sure there'd be additional cost savings down the line, but if you're designing and have the vision of the circular economy in mind when you're developing your first tieback, we think the savings there on the first use. The second challenge, I can really understand that one. I can understand it when you're looking at equipment that's already installed. I think what we've got an opportunity here though is we're looking at stuff that hasn't been designed, hasn't been fabricated or installed or operated yet. So we've got a real opportunity to address the second challenge. The third challenge is brilliant, eh? I think any technology or any initiative that's challenging an industry to change the commercial model or the contractual model, that's a really good challenge. Not quite sure how that commercial model would work, but I'm up for finding out. But a bit on the onshore handling piece, I think what our initial work is showing is you need the right facilities for this. Does Scotland have the right facilities? I think it probably does. And I believe the last challenge that we've got at the bottom there is maybe the key one. I think this is a paradigm shift in our thinking about how we develop tiebacks. More you think about it, and the more time you spend just mulling it over, I think it challenges you in the way your experiences of developments to date, and you start understanding that it's going to take a lot of alignment in the industry to achieve something like this initiative. And it's a big question whether our industry is capable of doing that. I think it would be a good talking point. Okay. Let's have a look at that website if you'd like some more information on it. And I think what I'll do now is hand over to Iain at LR. LR were awarded a scope to look at this that kicked off in December last year. So Iain, over to you.
Thanks, Graeme. So Graeme asked me to present here. My one condition was not to have to drive the Sharp Cloud software that OGTC uses. So my slides are there, so that's the first step. We're there. So what's it about? So basically what we're talking about here is a change of philosophy, change of mindset, which ties in what Graeme was talking about there, primarily around how the subsea industry interacts with fishing. So currently, I'm sure a lot of you out there are subsea designers. We design for fishing interaction. Despite the fact that we have safety zones, we design for interaction with fishing. That involves impact loads, it involves snagging loads, and it involves pullover loads. What that results in is putting very large structures down on the seabed. A lot of protection there. It also drives us in some cases to burying the flow lines. What does that mean? Well, obviously larger structures are more expensive, more difficult to install, and ultimately difficult to recover. If we're piling things to the seabed to react to loads from snagging, we've then got to cut those piles to recover. So if we take a different approach, we have safety zones currently. If we can trust those safety zones and say that we can keep fishing and oil and gas activities separate, that allows a different design philosophy, allows us to not account for the same loads we do normally, and that drives us to smaller structures, easier to recover, and potentially reuse somewhere else. And that all goes back to the circular economy theories that Graeme talked about. So in terms of where we are, we're in phase 2 currently. So phase 1 was run last year. OGTC commissioned some work to look at what the prize was here. Was it something that was feasible? And then also that's fed into defining the scope for the second phase of work that we're working through just now, and I'll talk more about that in a minute. So we're, very early stages in this. I'm not going to sort of put forward any conclusions from it here. It's more of an update on where we are currently. But ultimately, we hope to deliver a roadmap that says how we can actually implement this in the third phase of work. In terms of who's involved, a collaboration group was set up last year by OGTC. You can see the members there. At the top, we have the 2 major fishing organisations, so we're certainly keen to work closely with them. 2 operators, Nexon and Premier, and they've very kindly put their hands in their pockets to help fund this study. And also Oil and Gas UK, HSE and OGA. We had a workshop with all these parties last week and some really good involvement from that, and everyone's very keen to contribute. This is where we are on the timeline. So we were awarded this work shortly before the holidays, Christmas. So we're still in relatively early stages, a few weeks to go yet. So we held a workshop last week. Really good engagement there. I think we had over 140 ideas, issues, comments and things to work on. So we will take those and use them to focus on areas to work on over the next few weeks. So come the end of March, we hope to have a sort of draft set of guidelines and deliverables to discuss with the collaboration group. We'll then rework those and then come back with a final set, which will kick into phase 3 of the work. In terms of scope areas, these are the main areas that are in our scope to look at, and we're sort of working most of these in parallel currently. I'm just going to step through each of them. So first one is legal liability. So we're not looking for a solution that has to change the laws to work, because we understand that's going to take an amount of time to happen. So trying to work within existing legislation, particularly around safety zones and how they're applied. Second one, subsea design codes. Again, we're not proposing that we're going to go and write new codes for a different approach. The work we've done so far indicates that the codes do have a degree of flexibility. It's up to the designer to assess the loads they expect the infrastructure to see, and therefore do design as appropriate. And the third piece is risk management. We're talking about something a bit different here, so the question is, how does that affect the risks? Perhaps a different approach in that rather than designing more for consequences, for example, fisher interaction, we're looking at more reducing the probability. So if we can get probability down to a level that it becomes almost unthinkable we're going to have these interactions, that allows us to change the philosophy and how we design for the consequences. So having done that first phase of work, we think we might get to the stage where we identify some gaps from where we are now, where we want to get to. And we're hoping that technology might be a part of that and allow us to close those gaps. That might be technologies that exist currently, or it might be something that we need to go to industry and say, yeah, there's something here we need to bridge that gap. Can you help us with? Key aspect, of course, is interface with the fishermen. There is a good history there of working together with fishing industry, but we recognise that anything we do differently has to have them on board as well. And we've already had discussions with the SFF, and that will continue through the study. Ultimately, as I say, we're going to get to some kind of roadmap, some kind of guidelines on how we can go forward with this as a different approach. Just one slide here on some of the areas we think so far that are worth investigating further. First of those is the data journey. So when we install subsea facilities, we survey them, we process that, we put it into databases, we do QA checks, and that eventually gets disseminated to the fishermen. Now, obviously in that multi-stage journey, there's opportunities for perhaps errors to creep in. So we're trying to understand how robust is that? Is there ways we can make it more robust? And also is there opportunity to speed up the cycle time there? So it's normally a 6-month renewal of data. Now, if we can go from something being in the seabed and that information being rather quickly passed out to the fishermen, obviously there's much less risk of any interaction if we can do that. We're looking at renewables in terms of how they interact with fishing. Obviously they're putting a lot on the seabed just now, a lot of cables, a lot of individual wind turbines. So we're trying to learn lessons there. Third point is fish safe. So I don't know how many of you are aware, but there's been a programme over several years to basically put a plotter on all the vessels that go offshore. And this is a unit that sits about this size, effectively plots what's on the seabed so the fishermen can see on the screen what they're trawling over, and it also gives a GPS position of the vessel. And as well as being a plotter, it also has audible and visual warnings that tells them they're coming close to a safety zone or any other hazards. Now, speaking to the SFF, those units have been very well received. They are used and they're very well thought of by the fishermen. We're just moving into a phase of a third version of this unit being developed, so we're hoping to get involved in that early days and see if we can improve that and help it achieve our aims. That ties in with subsea safety zones. So currently, it's not mandatory, but in most cases we do apply for a subsea safety zone if we put a wellhead or a manifold offshore. Even with those safety zones, we still design for the interaction load. So there's a question there, why do we do that? Can we rely upon these safety zones such that we don't have to make those design decisions? Point on non-UK vessels. So interesting fact I've learned through this is that approximately 60% of the catch that comes out of UK waters is pulled out by non-UK vessels. Now, the UK vessels have access to fish safe, the non-UK vessels don't. So there's obviously a challenge there to look at how we can maybe change that, and we have to account for non-UK vessels in anything that we do. And this all plays into this revised philosophy. So, it's a change of mindset. We've done things, I've been a subsea engineer for many years, and we just tend to just do things the same way all the time. We're talking about something quite different here, and I appreciate there'll be challenges to that, but we're trying to work through that and see where the gaps are and close those gaps. Just one final point. Something I found from a House of Lords committee here where they were looking at the competing uses of the North Sea. and try to find ways where we collaborate together, different industries. They took evidence from lots of different bodies, fishermen, other users of the sea. And I think the findings were is that there is a good, long and productive history of oil and gas and fishing working together. And we feel that's something we can build on. Maybe it wasn't always the case. I think when start of oil and gas, we started to muscle in on the fishing patch. There was obviously some tension there. But I think we've managed to get past that. We've now got a mutual beneficial relationship. And we hope that we can continue with that through this study and into the future. So that's me.
Cheers, Iain. So I think we scheduled in a bit of Q&A just now, so hopefully there's some panel members kicking about that can, and I'll maybe field some questions. No. So I guess I think we've heard from all the panel this morning. So I think there's a couple of mics kicking about. If anybody has any questions, we can field them for 15 minutes.
From Digital Energy Journal. I didn't hear a very good definition of what the tieback of the future actually is. I think you said what it was going to do, but you didn't say what it actually was. But then the Wood Mackenzie numbers seem sure enough about what it is to work out what the cost savings are going to be. So I don't know if there's something you didn't present or it's just too complicated to present in a session like this. Or what's happening there?
Maybe I'll just bring up the slides again, if that's good. It's the 6 key areas that we need to look at, we feel, to bring the Tie Back the Future initiative to market. Happy to go through them if you want them in any more details, but hopefully the titles speak for themselves.
I think the question is a bit different, Graeme, and I think you did say 10 kilometres to
Thanks, Tammy. Sounds good. Make it an easy one, Tammy.
Right. Hello, I've got a question for Iain. So all this lovely stuff, I must admit, you know, when I see all roadmaps and guidelines, it just sounds as though we're going to take forever to do it. When do you think we're going to get to the stage where we can do this?
Fill your boots in.
Hello? Yes. So I guess I showed our timeline there, which is to get some guidelines in place by sort of around about Easter time past that. I guess that the phase 3, maybe something Graeme could talk more about the plans for how long it will take. I guess if you think about development of subsea field where the engineering up front might be, you know, a year and a half before FID, and then obviously another year and a half, 2 years beyond that. So we need designers to buy into this obviously relatively early on, possibly in select phase of engineering. So even if you get to that stage, you're probably still another 2 or 3 years away from actually seeing something implemented on the seabed. So.
No, the only thing I would say for my book, I think the legislation's in place. We have the right technology to bridge the gaps, so we could actually start doing it now, if you ask me in my book. I think what'll to get and deliver this in phase 3 is actually industry support. What we're finding just now, the OGTC, maybe speaking out of turn, and I'll get a boot in the bum from Chris in a minute, there's we can't fund this all ourselves at the OGTC, and we need support to deliver this. So if this is floating anybody's boat in the audience, and you're anywhere near a budget holder, I'd be really interested in speaking to you for sure.
Yeah, Willie Reid from the University of Strathclyde. Yeah, I just want to build on that. First of all, really congratulations on putting that strategy together. I first heard that at the 30th licensing round, and it made an impact then. I think it's made an impact again. I just want to ask about transferable technologies from other sectors. Have you thought of how to enhance this in looking at other areas that use the circular economy?
I'll pass that over to Chris Pearson. Good question.
Yeah, I feel a bit of a hospital pass on that one sometimes. Yeah, we've worked collaboratively with Zero Waste Scotland, who've got a fantastic record of dealing with other industry sectors. Some of the simple benefits are really things like waste. You're only on a building site, you find they've made something like 70% savings on the waste. So they only buy and design what they need. I think that's the essence of what Graeme was talking about in the tie-back of the future. It's doing enough engineering, minimal engineering, but enough engineering, robust engineering. It might be doing away with the umbilical and having a remote or distributed power network. It might be using reusable equipment through a manifold or a slot design manifold. There are a number of different techniques that we can apply. I think other industries such as aerospace, they use additive manufacturing, remanufacturing. There's a lot we can learn about how you take a large capital value piece of equipment and add value to it with low cost. Some of those techniques are quite expensive, and it hasn't really been trialed or scaled up. I mean, there's not many sort of jumbo jets carrying sort of 100-ton manifolds in the wing space. So there is that sort of scalability piece, which is of interest to us. But it is, we feel it's eminently doable. And we're really keen to learn from offshore wind, for instance, how they have the advantage of volume over the oil and gas industry at the moment in terms of constructions, etc. So we're really keen to learn from others how we can do this better. Does that answer your question, Willie?
I think I'd probably add as well there, Willie, that we have engaged with Zero Waste Scotland at the start of this initiative, and they've been really supportive to date. So we would hope down the line, you saw maybe the 13 proposals, actually a few of those would be looking to do those in tandem with Zero Waste Scotland. Any other questions on the go? Am I missing any hands? Thank you.
Hi, Yvonne Telford from Westwood Global Energy. I guess it's to all the panel, just based on Vari's presentation, but as Vari presented, there's 50% of the hubs at the moment have less than 5 years life remaining. So we're seeing really a timeline in terms of getting after some of these small pools, or a lot of small pools, to bring through some serious reserves and production through to the UK. And these are fields that have been deemed commercial already and haven't come through. So what does the panel kind of think the OGA, the OGTC needs to do to actually start delivering some of these projects and bringing them through to FID quickly in the next sort of 2 to 3 years to make these projects work to keep these hubs going?
I got to keep the microphone on. Thank you. I've lost the sense of team for a moment there. I don't know about the rest of you. Vary's going to take this. I guess I would say to that effect, from my perspective, we've already seen a great degree of collaboration between the Oil and Gas Authority, and it is an authority as opposed to DEC, and ourselves. I think the technology development plans that they took in last year and have all collated together and shortly going to be published. We can make sure that we are delivering technology that operators wish to pull through to these developments. We're always going to be in this place where we're fighting for prioritisation of capital. You know, if I choose to invest in a 50 million barrel field or a 5 million barrel field, I'm going to guess where we're going to go first and where we're going to go second. So I think our view here is we have to work on the risk matrix, as it were, to make sure that it's a more robust solution, that we can do it rapidly. You know, the people in this room have got a collective history of working in the oil and gas industry where we've delivered single well tiebacks in 10 months. You know, we've lost that a little bit, so we could dumb some of the tech down. But I think more importantly, to up the recovery factors, to get better efficiency and better economic utility, we have to bring, as Graeme says, different ways of working and change some of the ways that we design equipment and use equipment and some of the commercial models that go with that. That's just a personal view. I can hand you over to Vary now, I think.
Sure, so I think probably what I would add to, thanks for the question everyone sitting up there, is the corporate lens. So the idea of right assets in the right hands is something that's talked about loads recently in the UKCS, and we're starting to see it in action. In 2017, there was so much movement in the corporate ownership of the UKCS, and what we started to see was some of these small pools really being sanctioned, even by majors. You know, that we're seeing that folks are willing to take decisions on these types of projects because they see, even in global portfolios, they make sense. And as folks readjust their portfolios for resilience around $50 a barrel or $40 a barrel, even $35 a barrel, if you see some Aker BP talking about that. These sorts of decisions on quick cycle projects, which a lot of these small pools represent, are come to the fore a bit more, even though we're not talking about magic and huge volumes. So, yeah, maybe the corporate landscape is changing a bit in the favour of small pools too.
That's great, thank you.
Anybody got any more questions, or will we take a break for coffee? No questions for Steve on Subsea pork? Or cool. Well, hey, how about we? Oh, here we go. One more.
Thank you for a very interesting presentation. I'm Ragnar Gjengedal from Western Norway University of Applied Sciences. I was particularly interested to see all the small pools, and to see that Norway and Scotland, neighboring countries, has got a common challenge. And what is your opinion about developing and challenging universities, young people, to develop the solutions and the innovations needed to exploit these kind of small pools for the future? Would that be kind of a possibility and interesting to see it as a kind of a cooperation program between the countries?
Do you want me to?
Fill your boots.
Okay, we're still a sense of team here as well. I think it's a great question. I think Vary's graph shows the level of opportunity, from both our countries' point of view. I think within the Oil and Gas Technology Centre, we already have like a STEM program, science, technical engineering, etc. And we're looking to support industry. We're already working with universities. I think it's a fantastic opportunity that you raise, and perhaps we can talk about this separately, about how we could collaborate and set up some common themes, some common areas of work that would drive the next generation of much smarter, brighter, and certainly younger engineers into this space. And how we could make it interesting for them. I think the integration between marine renewables and oil and gas, the decarbonisation of the oil industry, is a very strong message at the moment. It's something we've all signed up to, or our governments have on our behalf, and it's a conundrum that we have to solve, as it were. So thank you for your question.
Yeah, and I can only add there as well, just on one of the proposals that we're looking at just now, does involve a lot of academia, and we're doing that through OGTC. In fact, understand the information that the OGTC sent out and the response on it's actually the internal coatings piece has been it's been one of the best responses that they've received to date on their work.
I guess it's worth explaining that it's the Oil and Gas Innovation Centre as opposed to the Technology Centre that Graeme's referring to there, another innovation-funded body that we collaborate with, and we sort of pass projects to and fro between ourselves wherever it's most appropriate to get traction.
Go on, Chris, pass it over. Tony Lang, NSRI. A couple of things here. Totally believe in the circular economy, definitely the way to go ahead. But there's a couple of things, observations. If you look at the whole field development aspect, the majority of costs fall down into two areas, and it's actually not in the infrastructure. And that's in drilling and installation, so I noticed that hasn't been mentioned. Second point, quite rightly, Chris, that you mentioned about maximising recovery. But notice on your themes there's nothing about EOR, IOR. And I'm not speaking but from the reservoir point of view. I'll put clarity to that. It's things like the wells, from whether it's smart ESPs, whether it is using multi-phase boosting, etc. So I just noticed that's not in your landscape there.
Because of the constraints and time, Tony, we didn't show you the full landscape, and obviously the focus is tie back to the future, then facility the future. We have a number of work themes about energy transfer, improved recovery, EOR, but we, like everyone else, have had to prioritise as we go through. I think the request when we from inception of the Oil and Gas Technology Centre was one about dealing with the now, the moment, supporting the supply chain, trying to facilitate projects, bring that technology that's almost there at TRL level, technology readiness level 9, etc. onwards. So we have focused that but there's a significant number of our proposals with universities are about EOR, are about other ways of working to maximise recovery, including Nikki's own area on heavy oil and steam, etc., etc. So it is a focus area. I'll let Valerie comment on directly on the well costs and the ABEX costs that she's used in her analysis.
Happy to follow up maybe by email with more detail, but I mean, I guess generally in our models we consider that well costs are about 50% of the cost. So you're right, that's the biggest portion to get after in terms of reductions that will have the highest impact in transforming economics. Yeah.
Is normally about 30%. So
yeah.
It's a relatively small proportion. That's the point.
Yep.
Yeah, I'll just add, Tony, on the cost model and economics we ran on this, I mentioned that we didn't touch the wells, topside modifications and the like, but we still believe it can have a big enough impact. I just brought this up though to show you as well. This is a full maybe pictorial view of what we're looking at, and you're right, this is just on one area. It's only on subsea infrastructure here that we're talking about, but actually there's a heck of a lot of other areas that we also need to address. I don't know.
Murat from Nexan. The non-technology component of this question is as important, and for me, I think it's a prerequisite to really get traction. How are you going to go about that part? That's commercial, alignment, clustering, all that sort of stuff.
Yeah, you're going to really be grateful you asked that question, because I think that's down to our membership and our operators, of which our company is a fantastic strategic partner for us. I think our ways of working, and it doesn't matter if you talk about a risk-based service contract or you talk about some form of alignment mechanism. I think the industry is creative enough, and we've got a grand history of how working more innovatively, more strategically across the supply chain, rather than sort of you take the pain when you don't perform singly. There are models that are out there, tried and tested. I saw Bob Rudderman in the room earlier on, and from a lifetime ago, Bob and I did a very small field, for Talisman on the Bewley field, 3 million barrels, on a very innovative commercial arrangement. So we've got the will to do it. Our job at the technology centre is to deliver the technology that will facilitate it, but you're very correct, it's a key element of how we're going to extrapolate the maximum value from the region.
It's a key challenge, Murat, for sure.
Just while the mic's in this part of the room, Will Davey with Precision Impulse. Quick question. Do you consider that there might be small pools left behind in big pools?
Small pools and big pools. Wee puddles is what I got called. I'm the wee puddles manager. Someone called me the other day. Obviously there are, and if you look at different techniques and exploitation techniques, there are companies who've got slightly older infrastructure at the moment who are making a very handsome living by changing their approach and rapid sweeping of reservoirs, etc. And within 10 months they can deliver a well, from doing the seismic, etc. So there's fantastic opportunities in mature assets. Some of these small pools, for clarity, they can be reached by extended reach drilling, and the Oil and Gas Authority, Neil Duncan, who's also in the room, and his colleagues have looked at what can we reach from existing infrastructure. They're not all going to be subsea. The focus for today is clearly the tieback of the future and the facility of the future, and so we can't cover everything. That'd be my comment. Does that answer your question?
I have a question. Give Chris a rest from answering all the questions, and Barry as well. My name is Richard Gibson, and I just like to ask, how come it's pork we're going to get from the seabed, not beef or chicken?
Nice one, Richard. Like that style.
You can get all of them. The question is, which one will come first?
Good shout. We've got one more here, yeah.
It's Bob Rudderman here. It's an observation. I think if this was any other industry and you looked at the size of the prize, people would be jumping about saying, how are we going to get after it? And we are perhaps at times dogged with our own successful history and look at this and think it's awfully small, it's awfully difficult. We need to almost just say, pause, let's take the best of the past, forget some of the scale piece, and look at the size of that prize, and let's just get going. It's a massive prize.
Yeah, I'd like, Steve, could you say something on that, buddy?
Not talking about pork and chicken, but instead talking about there's a challenge to be done, which is other industries have seen it, which is where the ability to change how you get reward and recognition in the industry. And we've seen it in downstream. There's some people in the room here I know who've got experience of it from downstream, but it's never been that successful in the upstream side of the business. And I do wonder whether or not now is the time, with all the various different parties coming together, technology development, the new challenges that are facing, the way in which different things can come together, that sheer magnitude of change that's required. Maybe there is a very different way in which that reward system can be changed, which in turn can mean investment can flow from different quarters and different sources into the sector and allow us to accelerate the pace.
How are we doing? Coffee time? Call it a wrap. Okay, thanks very much. What we're going to do is just have a 10-minute break, grab facilities, coffee, whatever, and then we'll get going on the facility of the future in at 10 to 12. Thank you.